directing the military to strip the names of Confederate leaders from bases. Again, stupid there. He also has demanded the bill. That's a dumb reason. He has also demanded that the bill include the repeal of a legal shield for social media companies he is tangled with, a significant legislative change that Republicans and Democrats, like I said, that is irrelevant to a bill that dictates military policy. So he's pretty much just like holding, it's like, stop banning my tweets on social media so we can fund the military. Or like that. Like that's what he like decided to leverage for military funding. Just how companies treat him personally and his friends in conservative media on Twitter. Like it's really kind of just incredibly, just a great sign of the incompetence and just general fecklessness of the government in general, and Trump specifically. So this legislation, known as the National Defense Authorization Act, which authorizes raises for American troops, has long-standing broad bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, with lawmakers eager to use the bill as an opportunity to demonstrate support for the military, national security, and secure wins in their own communities. Of course, there's a lot of pork in this bill as well. So, of course, really what they don't tell you here in mainstream papers like the New York Times is that, of course, there's going to be huge increases in funding for other programs. Of course, troops, like there's nothing wrong with troops on its face getting paid more money. I personally don't think that anybody in a working position and a non-management position, like I don't really object to most groups of like non-executives in certain organizations getting raises as kind of as a principle, but we do see here is a lot of just. But I mean, we're dealing with the military here. We're dealing with the U.S. military here. So there's going to be really a lot of awful things in this bill, which is like continued funding for all the awful stuff that we already know about that the military does on a daily basis. Like we got people continued funding for the war in Yemen. We got just continued funding for Afghanistan. Just continued involvement in like funding for some of the worst programs in places like the NSA that really kind of creep in on American civil liberties all the time. So like all this kind of stuff, all this bill really does, in effect, is sure it throws the troops a raise, which is personally I have no objection to, but what it also does is continue the hum of the national security state and really expanding it completely. So that is still an issue that, I mean, it's not really a completely important issue for Americans. I do believe that the just reverence for the United States military has rubbed off a little bit since the Iraq War era, and people are, I think, getting a little bit more skeptical of United States military might and military power usage, and especially how it's used abroad. But what we do see here is like this continued drive for lawmakers just to be like very, very much still in that political mindset, just like we need to support the troops. Like we can't say anything bad against it. And again, it's not the troops specifically. It's like they're simply kind of cogs in the machine. They are just kind of like people like pushing the system along, as we know. But this definitely continues the system humming right as it is. So, if not expanding it further. So Trump's objections to the legislation have left some Republicans who are typically loath to challenge the president poised to override this veto. So Representative Mac Thornberry of Texas, the top Republican on the House Armed Services Committee, the panel responsible for legislation, urged his colleagues not to let politics dictate their vote. Your decision should be based upon the oath we all took, which is the Constitution, rather than any person or organization. And by the way, the Constitution does not say pour billions and billions of dollars into conflicts all over the globe, funding massive national security state, like that, like the idea that we're doing this is about the Constitution. We're standing up for the Constitution. Like this is a bold thing that people like Jefferson and Madison and Washington would have wanted. They would have wanted us to send $500 million of unconditional aid on top of more aid we already sent to places like Israel and other really bad actors all across the country. We are doing our constitutional duty in this moment. We are expanding our army to the largest in history, using it as a force to lord over not just Americans, but citizens all over the world. Like, no, like, this is absolutely ridiculous, and it's just such an infuriating just frame of reference that so many people in our government, both, again, Democrats and Republicans, consistently take. So, really, an indication of the party's fealty to Trump, two of the top Republicans in the House, Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise of Louisiana, said they will vote to sustain the president's veto. It is unclear how many lawmakers would join them. And we do have that. Actually, we do have that. It's 322 to 87, so a huge amount of, like, pretty much the entire House voted to do this veto override here, so in a pretty strong way. So here is the clip from that, a pretty strong and relatively unsurprising, I'd say, repudiation of Trump and the kind of really dumb and stupid reasons that he, like, you gotta come a little bit stronger than that when you're trying to, like, disassemble U.S. military power. But here is how it happened earlier today in the House, earlier Monday, December 28th in the House. So, yeah, it was the title. The title was we have one yay, one independent voting yay and one independent voting nay. I didn't know they're independents in the House. But 20 Republicans didn't vote, actually.
On this vote, the yeas are 322, the nays are 87, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The bill is passed. The objections of the president to contrary notwithstanding, the clerk will notify the Senate of the action of the House.
So there you go. That is how that went down. Yeah, so it really is a interesting kind of political dynamic that we see continuing here as they... I mean, Trump, like, with his objections, none of them really were good or substantive, but I think the case still stands that money to the military should be less and less each year, not more and more each year, as it has been for so long. For 60 years, they've passed these military funding bills with pretty much without any incident. But interestingly enough, though, we just had this coming in now. A little bit of a side here. We do have the two House Democrats who voted no on the recent authorization of the $2,000 stimulus checks that we talked about at the top of the show. Dan Lipinski, beaten by new member of the squad, Marie Newman, and Oregon Representative Kurt Schrader, who was elected to his 7th House term last month. So, there you have it. Those are who voted no on the Democratic side, and thank God, Dan Lipinski, pretty much a Republican. Frankly, it's insane. Like, you go through the list, what Democratic position, like, what traditional Democratic positions does this guy have? I mean, you'd really be hard-pressed to find them. It is really insane. But that does seem to be the only two members of the House Democratic caucus who voted no against this. For our final piece of news tonight, I do want to take a look at the we're going to go back to the force the vote controversy because it is a very interesting thing that I think is really animating a lot of discussion on the left. We are definitely a left-wing show. There's no doubt about that. But we will definitely be taking a look at this piece by Paul Bless, someone who I definitely like, read a lot, and especially here on the show. And I do want to get a look at what he has to say. So, Medicare for All has had a pretty horrible year. For about a month of February, it looked like the biggest champion of single-payer in the U.S., Bernie Sanders, was on the path to winning the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. Then came South Carolina, a few calls from Barack Obama, and, oh yeah, the coronavirus. And by that time, the full gravity of the pandemic had hit most Americans. The biggest anti-Medicare for All Democrat in the primary had all but sewn up the nomination. Popular support for Medicare for All steadily grew as the Sanders movement gained strength. And again, I think that's something that those two are not unrelated. I think it's a big, big help when you have someone like Bernie Sanders and people like really occupying a cultural, a really strong, firm space and being out there, being in the news every day, in the media, talking to people, advocating for things like Medicare for All on a big, regular basis, and on a big scale too, like both in public media circles, like where everyone can see it, and the stuff that's not really always in the headlines, like organizing, knocking on doors, canvassing for it, stuff like that. And really informing people about some of the big splits in the parties. So right now it looks like it's holding firm at really high level support, but the crushing of the Democratic left and the party's anemic performance in 2020 have combined to make the single-payer system appear about as far away as it has ever been. In fact, the number of co-sponsors in the House, 118 and 14, dipped slightly from where they were in the last Congress at 124 in the House and 16 in the Senate, respectively. So, be interesting to see who dropped there. But again, and so really all the question is about how do we, obviously the big question is how do we get Medicare for all? And how, kind of the secondary question is here, how do we expose the massive gap in opinion between the Democratic Party, the Democratic leadership and the Democratic base? And how do we get the Democratic base to do, or the Democratic leadership to do something about it? And not just the Democratic base supporters, but like large percentage of the American people support it as well. Most people on the left are rightfully demoralized and frustrated about this kind of predicament that we see. All this makes the current blow up in left media over the utility of pushing some of the most left-wing members of the House to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi for one final term as Speaker in order to force a floor vote on Medicare for All is very understandable. So we definitely, like, these debates, I think, overall are good to have. But what I think is not good is people making these, like, really reckless and senseless allegations against people who genuinely do want Medicare for All. And again, you can get annoyed at people, you can get, like, pissed off at the grifters. But again, like, even people, yes, even Jimmy Dore, although I think he really kind of annoyingly supported Tulsi Gabbard, I do believe everybody in this conversation, even Jimmy Dore, genuinely want Medicare for All. And they're not trying to just raise their own brands because of it. Like, they do care a lot about Medicare for All. And again, this is Paul Bless here. One side of the argument are a sizable number, coming from a sizable number of people on the left, most prominently commentator Jimmy Dore, and former Sanders press secretary and writer Breonna Joy Gray. They have said that AOC and other members of this squad should use their leverage against Pelosi, who have the slimmest Democratic House majority since World War I, to force Pelosi to guarantee a floor vote on Medicare for All. On the other side are people like Ocasio-Cortez and a different set of leftist pundits and journalists. I think it's really interesting how that divide works. The fight has turned intense and brutally personal, the kind of thing that happens when a movement has been knocked back and has to pick itself up again. Again, I think that fight it has turned incredibly personal, by the way, on both sides. So all these people out there complaining about what Jimmy Dore has said, I think really are showing themselves to be, again, people on the other side of this argument, the anti-Jimmy Dore, the anti-quote-unquote force the vote side, as they're calling themselves these days, the Jimmy Dore idea supporters, like, they have really, I mean, who cares? Like, who cares what Jimmy Dore says? If he gets mad at somebody on a live stream and he starts swearing at them, what is the big deal? I don't see it doesn't affect you. Like, what's the big deal? Like, why are you, Jimmy Dore, he's mean. Like, he's yells for views on YouTube, but again, he's fighting for the same things you are. What's the big deal? I don't get it. I think, like, attacking people like AOC and against their and attacking their motivations and intentions for not entirely supporting it is wrong. But, like, going up to people like Jimmy Dore and being like, I won't support you, I won't stand with you because you're yelling too loudly, is really counterproductive. The proponents of a floor vote have a lot of understandable frustrations and some valid arguments, but for reasons I'll get into, this is again Paul Bless here, a floor vote ultimately isn't worth it right now. That naturally raises the questions, if not now, when? And again, I think that's a question that should really specifically be answered, because it's very, very easy for people who are anti-force to vote to be like, hey, we can't do it right now. And then next time comes around, I don't know about it. I don't know. We can't. We gotta wait. We gotta push back a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean, more importantly, how does the left put itself into a position to actually come out of it looking like it has its SHIT together and can be a powerful force for progress in America. And again, I kind of take a little bit of an issue